Good afternoon. So today we're trying something a little bit different. Okay, we're going to try this on the Smart Notebook. All right, so now we're working on orders of operations. These are a little more difficult. Okay, right here we're just going to solve these. Right, we're doing orders of operations. We're just going to solve these very basically. We're going to do top and bottom when we break it apart. Okay, so that's what we want to do to keep this as neat as possible. It looks daunting. You're like, man, how do I do this? So we're going to break it up for top here and bottom here. And we're only going to work one at a time. You don't have to worry about the other one. So first we see we're going to write this down. That's -4 minus 1, right? And that's an ugly one, but that's going to be my 1 for today. And then that's going to be my absolute value sign there. All right, and then that's going to be multiplied by negative -2 to the 4th power. So we're just going to use GEMDAS to solve this. So I'm going to write down GEMDAS right here. G-E, right, M-D-A-S. And I say that to myself every time. And what I'm saying is groupings, exponents, multiplication, division, whichever comes first from left to right, addition and subtraction, whichever comes first from left to right. So the first thing I'm going to do is grouping. Now I go inside the grouping, that's -4 minus 1. That's going to leave me with -5. My handwriting will get better as I go along. All right, I write down everything else. Now I still haven't taken care of this grouping, okay, because that's the absolute value of -5, which equals 5. Now we have 5 times -2 to the 4th power. Then I'm going to go ahead and evaluate the exponents. I've done my grouping, exponents next. I know that I'm going to take 2 to the 4th power. Well, what about this negative? Because the exponent can't see this, the exponent can only see the negative when it is inside of parentheses. So that is not inside of parentheses. So that negative is just going to drop down and be a part of the answer. So 2 to the 4th power is 16. So what we are finished with is 5 times -16. And 5 times 16 is 80. And that's going to be -80 because we multiply the negative by a positive. So as I come back here and I start, that's going to be 80 over, well, we haven't finished the bottom yet. So that's going to be -3, right, to the 4th power. And now that's going to be minus a -1. So what we have here is -3 to the 4th power. This exponent can see that negative sign, so this looks like -3, right, times -3, right, times -3, one more time, times -3. That's what that looks like, okay? So that is actually going to be a positive 81. Now we move on, we do minus a -1, and minus a negative turns into a positive, and you get 82. Now here, if you come up with this problem, you are on your way to getting an A, but you're not there yet. What you have to do is simplify this. We know that for every even number, a number 2 can go in. Okay, so first we divide it by 2. 80 divided by 2 is 40. So we're going to write this right here, 40. And then that's divided by 41, and it's negative. So our answer would be -40 divided by 41. You could write that here just to give yourself a place to show your work. Remember, we're going to box everything because we have all of these numbers to go through. All right, we're going to do another one over here. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing I did for the other one. I'm going to go ahead and make that top and make this bottom over here. Okay, that sounds good. So now the first thing we're going to do is write down our brackets. Okay, 10.5, okay, minus the absolute value of 2.5 minus 8 absolute value, all of that to the 2nd power. And we're going to start with our GEMDAS. So do we see a grouping? Why, yes, we do see a grouping. This is our first grouping, right? Let's go ahead and write down that GEMDAS every time to help us to remember. our first grouping is here, right? This is our first signal of grouping, right? That's our bracket. Inside of the grouping, you start with GEMDAS over again. So once I get inside that grouping, I go ahead and I say, is there another grouping that we can look at? And there is, absolute values. Now we take care of the absolute value before we take care of anything else. So we do 2.5 minus 8, and that is 5.5. And that's going to be a negative 5.5 because the 8 was bigger than the 2. We always take the sign of a bigger number. So now we have 10.5 minus the absolute value of 5.5 squared. And we know the absolute value of 5.5 is 5, so we're just going to write that down, right? Minus 10.5. Still not done. 10.5 minus 5.5 is 5, right? And we're still not done because now we have to square that. 5 squared, yes sir, is 25. Now we have to do the bottom. We have negative 2 to the 4th power. And negative 2 to the 4th power is 16. So now we have to put 25 over 16. This is going to be my answer here. And we'll see that that cannot be reduced, and that is going to be our answer. All right, so let's move on to, these are a couple of problems from your homework, okay? So on page 25, these are numbers 1 and 2. So if you're having a problem with your homework, I will walk you through your homework problems right here. On page 25, these are 1 and 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is do top and bottom. All right. And the first thing we're going to have is 0.3, right, next to the parentheses of 2 to the 3rd power minus 3.6, close parentheses. And then we're going to minus, right, the absolute value of negative 1. All right, now, first thing we're going to do is write down GEMDAS every time. So we do have grouping, so we're going to go inside of grouping. Is there any more grouping inside of grouping? No, there's not. So now we're going to move on to exponents. 2 to the 3rd power is 8, so we'll write that down. 8 minus 3.6, right? And we're going to put 0.3 there, all right, minus the absolute value of negative 1. Okay, now 8 minus 3.6 is 4.4. So we're working down our grouping here, all right? That's already simplified as low as it can go. Now we're going to come over here to the absolute value of negative 1, which is 1. So we have 0.3 multiplied by 4.4 minus 1. So 0.3 times 4.4 is 1.32 minus 1, right, which is going to leave us with 0.32. So now we have 0.32. I'm sorry, that's not right. 0.32, right? That's the top of our equation, or that's the top of our fraction. So we're going to have 0.2, right, to the 5th power. And if you put that in your calculator, 0.2 to the 5th power, you're going to get 0.00032. So 32 is going to be divided by 0.00, right? 3 zeros, 32. So down here, I made a mistake and I put too many zeros, so I'm just going to erase that and put the right amount of zeros in. Now, what is 0.32 divided by 0.00032? That's 1,000. So your answer for this is simply 1,000. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next one. Same thought process here, top and bottom. Here's a top, here's a bottom. All right, so now we're going to write what we see here, right? We're going to write the absolute value of -2 plus the square root of 25, right? Multiplied by 8 plus 24 divided by -3. The first thing we're going to do is take care of our grouping. Do we see a grouping? I see a grouping. -2 plus the square root of 25. Well, do you see a grouping inside that grouping? Yes. The first thing we're going to do, you must always do groupings, exponents, multiplication, division from left to right, addition, subtraction from left to right. I need to see this so I know that you're reminding yourself what order to do. Square root of 25 is 5. Gotta knock that out first, because this radical here is a grouping. It's considered a grouping. So now we do -2 plus 5 and you get to 3. Okay? And we'll just bring this down every time. -3 there, and you finish with 8 plus 24 minus 3, and this is going to be 3 times 8 plus 24 divided by -3. Okay, so 3 times 8 is 24, and 24 divided by 3 is what? -8. So 24 divided by -8 is 16. Let's write that right here at the top. You see how when we break this up to top and bottom, it's not that difficult. It gets considerably easier. All right, so now we're going to do 2 to the 5th power, and 2 to the 5th power is, wait a minute, 32. Sometimes my brain works a little slower than it should. All right, and -2 times 32, I think I can do this one as -64. So now that's the bottom of our fraction. So this fraction is not going to come out even like 1,000. 1,000 is perfect, right? That's what we want. So this is not going to come out perfect as a natural counting number, okay? So what we're going to do is leave it as a fraction. We're not going to turn it as a decimal, but we are going to divide it by the number that goes into both. So 16 can be divided by, what, 8? So that's going to be 2. I think 16 can be divided by 16, but we're just going to go one step at a time. If I do 16 divided by 8, that gives me 2. And 64, right, divided by 8 gives us another 8. So now we have 2 8s. There's another number that can go in there, so that's going to be 2. You're going to have 1 to the -4. All right. So your answer is, we can write that one here, 1/4 or -1/4. All right, let's move on. So that's how we do that. Orders of operations when you have fractions. Go ahead and break it apart. It's going to be a lot easier when you break it apart. Just worry about the top, then you worry about the bottom. Let's move on. Go to the next one. All right, now we have simplifying expressions and then evaluate. So there's 2 ways to do these problems. You can just plug the number in, right, because we're evaluating here, or you can simplify. We have to read the directions. On your homework and on your test, you're going to have both. One, you're going to have to simplify, and this one asks you to do the simplification first. So we have a -1 outside of here. We're going to start with the problem. I see groupings. We're still following GEMDAS to the fullest, right? We're going to do that to the best of our ability, okay? So now, to get rid of this parentheses, in order to combine everything, I have to multiply that negative, right? So what I'm going to use is a -1. So I'm going to multiply 7x by -1. I'm going to get -7x. I'm also going to multiply -11 by -1, positive 11, right, plus 6x minus 1. Before I substitute that x, I'm going to continue simplifying, which means I'm going to combine like terms. Like terms are terms that have the same variable. So I have 6x, I have -6x. I'm going to write those next to each other just to help me out. These are like because they have the same variable and they have the same exponent. The exponent is 1 and the exponent is 1. So now negative 6 plus 7 is going to, or negative 7 plus 6 is going to be negative 1x. Now we're going to do 11 plus, or positive 11 minus 1, and that's going to be plus 10. You could also write this as negative x plus 10. Okay, there you go. Now, same thing over here. If we move over here, we're also have been asked to simplify before you evaluate. So we always start with the distributive property because that takes care of our grouping. See how that all works together? It takes care of our grouping first. So we're going to multiply by what number? Negative 4. So we're just going to drop down that 3a. It's going to be negative 4b plus 28. A negative times a negative. Take the sign in front of the term. And then you're going to do plus 4b over here, correct? Okay, now let's combine. Is there anything combined with the 3a? No, there's not another term with a in it. So the 3a just comes down. Is there anything to combine with the b? Yes, there's negative 4b, right? So I'm going to just do negative 4b plus 4b. That's the inverse property of addition. Number plus its opposite equals 0, right? So that's just going to equal 0. So we have 3a plus 28. Now we throw the a in there, negative 2, and negative 3 times negative 2 is negative 6 plus 28 equals 22. There we go. So you guys see how we could have just went straight ahead and dropped those variables in there. All right, the numbers for the variables which we call evaluating the expression. Instead, we simplified the expression, and that helped us to move at a quicker rate. Okay, so now also you'll be on the test, and you'll have the same exact type of problem, the same expression, but they'll say just evaluate. Okay, these are also from your homework. Okay, I think these are on page 25, I'm not sure, but these should look familiar if you are looking at your homework. Okay, so now we'll just drop these in. First we'll do 6, and then c squared. We're going to use parentheses first and always, and that's 2 squared minus 18, right? And that's also 2 squared plus 4, and then we're going to use d, so we'll do 5, and then minus 1. So then we'll just exponents first. Any groupings? You guys see any groupings we have to take care of? I do see groupings, right? But they are as simplified as they can be. I can't do anything with 2. I can't do anything with 5, so we're going to leave that alone. Now we're going to go to exponents, so we'll check that off. Exponents, 2 squared is 4, so we're going to leave that there. Minus 18, and we're also going to make that a 4. It's very important right now not to drop your parentheses. These parentheses tell us that we're multiplying. So we're going to do 6 times 4, which is 24. Then we're going to do 18 times 4, which is 72. Now, I do a negative 18 times a positive 4, and I get negative 72. And we'll just keep moving, plus 4 times 5 is 20, minus 1. Now, for the sake of time, we're just going to add that all up. 24 minus 72 plus 20 minus 1 is equal to negative 29. Negative 29. There you go. So that's your answer. So you guys see, it's possible to do it both ways, and you need to be able to do it both ways. Okay, this one we're moving on to the next one. We're not going to distribute first. We're just going to plug in. When you have parentheses inside of parentheses, you must change the outer parentheses into a bracket. A is negative 2, so I'm just going to drop negative 2 in there, minus 5, and I'm going to make that a bracket because B is going to turn to a set of parentheses. Minus 7, close the bracket, plus 4, open some parentheses, negative 2, and close the parentheses. All right, now we're going to do GEMDAS like we always do. This entire unit is based on using GEMDAS, okay? First thing we're going to do is go inside of the grouping. 3 minus 7 leaves us with negative 4. Leave that there so you guys understand what operations are being signaled or what operations need to be done. almost finished here. Now, I have 3 times negative 2, negative 4 times negative 5, and 4 times negative 2. 3 times negative 2 is going to give me negative 6. Now, when I multiply these, they are going to give me integers. The integers are going to have a positive or negative sign. Put whatever the sign is in front, and that becomes your operation. So, negative times a negative is positive, positive 20. So we're simply going to add negative 6 to 20. Over here, we have a positive times a negative. Positive 4 times a negative 2 gives me negative 8, and that just becomes my operation of minus. Negative 6 plus 20 gives me 14. Minus 8 gives me 6. Your answer here should be 6. All right, you guys, there we have it. That is what we are going to have for our practice for the test. Come back, look at these problems, and I hope they helped. Bye.